Have you ever wondered what a country looks like before it wakes up? Most people imagine quiet streets, empty roads, and cities still sleeping. But Vietnam is different. If you wake up at 5 in the morning, you will discover a completely different country, a country that most tourists never see. The first time I drove through my city before sunrise, I expected silence. Instead, I found life everywhere. The sky was still dark. Street lights were still glowing. The air felt cooler than it would. Only a few hours later, there were no traffic jams, no impatient horns. Just the soft sound of motorbikes passing through empty streets. It felt peaceful. Almost like the city was taking one deep breath before another busy day. As the road stretched ahead of me, I noticed something interesting. The people, already awake, were not rushing to work in expensive offices. They were the people who quietly keep Vietnam moving every single day. A woman pushing a small food cart to the corner of the street. A man arranging fresh vegetables outside his tiny shop. Street cleaners carefully sweeping leaves before anyone else arrived. Security guards finishing their night shift. Delivery drivers checking their motorbikes before the first order appeared. These people rarely become famous. Most visitors never remember their faces. But without them, Vietnam would never wake up the way it does. A few minutes later, the smell began to change. If you have ever visited Vietnam, you know exactly what I mean. The smell of fresh broth slowly floating into the street. Someone had already been cooking pho for hours. Nearby, another family was grilling pork for banh mi. Fresh coffee was dripping slowly through small metal filters. Even before sunrise, the entire street already smelled like breakfast. One thing I love about Vietnamese mornings is that they are never loud, they are gentle. The city does not suddenly wake up, it slowly comes alive. One shop opens, then another. One motorbike becomes 10 become 100 within an hour. The quiet streets begin transforming into something completely different. But before that happens, there is a short moment, maybe only 20 or 30 minutes, when everything feels perfectly balanced. This is my favorite time of day. As I continued driving, I passed a small park. It was already full. Not with children, not with tourists, but with grandparents. Some were walking together. Some were practicing Tai Chi. Others were simply sitting on benches talking to old friends they have probably known for decades. Nobody seemed to be in a hurry. Nobody was looking at their phone for them. This was not exercise, it was part of life. A little farther down the road, groups of cyclists rode quietly through the empty streets. Some smiled as they passed each other. Others stopped at a roadside tea store before heading home. These simple moments rarely appear in travel videos, but they tell you more about Vietnam than any famous landmark ever could. People often ask me why Vietnamese cities feel so alive. I think the answer begins long before sunrise. Because every morning millions of ordinary people wake up with a purpose. Not to become rich overnight, not to become famous, but simply to build a better life. For themselves and for the people they love. That quiet determination is something you can feel. Even if nobody says a single word when the first rays of sunlight finally appeared above the buildings, the streets changed once again. Students in school uniforms began riding bicycles. Parents carried sleepy children on motorbikes. Small cafes filled with people drinking coffee. Before work, construction workers gathered outside job sites. Factory buses rolled toward the industrial zones. The city was fully awake, and just like that, a brand new day had begun. Most visitors think Vietnam is beautiful because of its mountains, its beaches, or its famous food. I understand why they think that, but after living here, I believe the real beauty of Vietnam begins much earlier. It begins before sunrise, when millions of ordinary people quietly start another day without applause, without attention, without expecting anyone to notice. And maybe that is the most beautiful side of Vietnam, the side that only the early morning gets to see. The more I travel across Vietnam, the more I realize something. The most important people are often the ones nobody notices. They don't appear on television. They don't become internet celebrities. They don't have millions of followers. But every single morning, long before most people wake up, they are already at work. As I continue driving, the city is becoming busier. A small woman is standing behind a street food cart. Steam rises into the cool morning air. She has probably been awake since 3 o'clock, preparing broth, cutting herbs, boiling noodles. By 6 in the morning, her first customers are already arriving. Office workers, students, construction workers, everyone stops for a quick breakfast before another busy day begins. She smiles as she serves every bowl. She remembers the regular customers. Some don't even need to order. She already knows exactly what they want. Just a few streets away, an elderly man slowly unlocks the doors of his tiny coffee shop. He carefully places small plastic chairs along the sidewalk. The coffee begins dripping through traditional metal filters. Nothing happens quickly. Vietnamese coffee teaches patience. People sit together, they talk, they read the news. Some simply watch the world wake up around them. For many Vietnamese, coffee is not just a drink. It is how the day begins. I continue driving toward the industrial area. Hundreds of motorbikes begin filling the roads. Many riders are wearing the same uniforms. They are factory workers. Some travel 20 or 30 kilometers every day. Rain or sunshine, cold mornings or hot afternoons, they keep going because somewhere at home someone is waiting for them. A child, a husband, a wife, or aging parents. Sometimes we talk about a country's economy, its exports, its factories, its rapid growth. But behind every number, there is a real person, someone who wakes up before sunrise, works all day, and returns home after dark, not because life is easy, but because responsibility comes before comfort. Leaving the city behind, the roads become quieter. The buildings slowly disappear. Green rice fields begin stretching toward the horizon. A farmer walks through the fields carrying simple tools. The work has already begun. For generations, this rhythm has remained almost unchanged. The weather changes, technology improves, but the land still asks for patience, hard work, and hope. Many people dream of modern cities, but Vietnam never forgot its villages even today. Millions of families still depend on agriculture. Every bowl of rice, every tropical fruit, every fresh vegetable begins with someone working quietly under the morning sky. One thing I admire about Vietnamese people is their ability to find happiness in simple moments. A bowl of hot noodles before work, a cup of coffee with friends, a smile from a familiar customer, a short conversation outside a neighborhood shop. These moments may seem ordinary, but together they create a life that feels deeply connected. Perhaps that is why mornings in Vietnam feel different. People are busy, but they still greet each other. Street vendors wave to familiar faces. Neighbors ask if everyone is doing well. Children laugh on the way to school. Even strangers often exchange a smile as the sun climbs higher. Traffic becomes heavier. The peaceful streets I drove through an hour ago are now full of life. Cars, motorbikes, school buses, delivery trucks. The city is awake. The work has begun, and yet I keep thinking about all the people I passed earlier this morning. The woman selling breakfast, the old man making coffee, the street cleaner, the factory worker, the farmer. Most people will never know their names, but without them Vietnam would never feel the way it does, because the real heartbeat of this country has never been found in its tallest buildings. It has always been found in ordinary people quietly doing extraordinary things. Every single morning, by now sun is fully above the horizon. Quiet streets I drove through just a few hours ago have completely disappeared. City is Alevematorbix. Fill every intersection. Cove shops are full. Schools have opened their gates. Markets are crowded, and the sound of everyday life is everywhere. For many, Pieplefis is when the day begins, but for millions of Vietnamese, half of the day's work has already been done. That is something I have always admired. Vietnam's people rarely complain about waking up early. It is simply part of life, not because they enjoy losing sleep, but because every new morning is another chance to build a better future for themselves, for their children, and for the next generation. As I stop at a small roadside coffee shop, look around. Nobody seems to be in a hurry. Some people quietly drink their coffee before work. Others read the morning news on their phones. A few old friends laugh together, as they have probably done for years. The owner knows almost every customer by name. He already remembers what they drink. Without a skink, coffee is already being prepared. It reminds me that in Vietnam many places still feel personal. You are not just another customer. You become part of someone's daily routine. I finish my coffee and continue driving on the way. See school children waving goodbye to their parents. A fruit seller carefully ranging fresh mangoes and dragon fruit. A delivery driver smiling as he greets another rider at a red light. A mechanic opening a small garage that has served the neighborhood for decades. These moments are so ordinary that most people never stop to notice them, but I think they are the moments that truly define a country. Travel guides will tell you where to find the best beaches. Tallest buildings are the most famous attractions, but they rarely tell you about the people. The people who wake up before sunrise, prep a breakfast for strangers, sweep the streets. Before everyone else wakes up, grow the food that feeds millions suspend their lives working quietly without expecting recognition. They may never become famous, but they are the reason Vietnam feels Vietnamese people ask Mu Hat is the most beautiful place in Vietnam. Answer surprises them because I never name a famous destination. Instead, tell them to wake up before 5 in the morning. Rent a motorbike, drive slowly through a local neighborhood, stop at a small food store. Order a bowl of pho, drink Vietnamese coffee on a plastic chair beside the road, watch the city. Wake up 1 minute at a time. That is where you will find the Vietnam I know, not the Vietnam on postcards, not the Vietnam shown in travel advertisements, but the real Vietnam, a country built by ordinary people who work hard, care deeply for their families, and never stop moving forward, Mabe. That is why I never get tired of Vietnamese mornings. Every sunrise tells the same story, a story of determination, and quiet resilience. No matter how much the country changes, no matter how modern the cities becometh, its spirit is still hairy. You can see it in the first bowl of pho served before dawn, in the street cleaner finishing the last corner before traffic begins, in the grandmother buying fresh vegetables for her family in the factory, worker beginning another long shift, and in the millions of people who quietly start another day without asking for applause. If you ever visit Vietnam, know yourself, one favor, do not sleep until 9 o'clock. Wake up before the sun, because that is when Vietnam is at its most honest, its most peaceful, and perhaps its most beautiful. Thank you for spending this morning with me. If you enjoyed seeing this side of Vietnam, subscribe to Inside Vietnam Backhouse. There are still countless ordinary stories that deserve to be remembered, and I will see you again before the next sunrise.